I never thought I'd be the kind of person who buys a lake. Not in my wildest dreams. But there I was, signing the papers for the property next door. The moment my signature hit the dotted line, I felt this weird mix of pride and, well, terror. Because if there's one person in this neighborhood who's about to lose her mind over this, it's Karen. Karen, the HOA queen, the self-appointed sheriff of suburban drama, the woman who measures everyone's lawn with a ruler like it's her personal Bible. She's the kind of person who calls a board meeting just because someone dared to put pink flamingos on their lawn. And now I own the lake right next to her pristine, perfectly manicured property. The first clue that things were about to get interesting, the phone call. Her voice was that pitch-perfect combination of rage and disbelief that only Karen can manage. "You bought the lake," she squealed. That's impossible." I could hear her neighbors probably holding popcorn in the background because the sheer theatrics were that intense. I tried to keep it calm, measured. "Yep, bought it, all mine now." There was a long, heavy pause. I could almost see her face turning red, maybe even purple. Then came the screaming. I swear she sounded like a foghorn combined with a toddler being denied ice cream. "Do you know what you're doing? You can't just, this is HOA property, And then she just hung up. At first I laughed. I mean, who doesn't love a good Karen meltdown? But then reality hit. This wasn't just a phone call, this was a storm warning. Karen doesn't just sulk in silence. She mobilizes, she plots, and she convinces the entire neighborhood to march to her drumbeat. So I did what any normal person would do. I started daydreaming. Big, crazy daydreams, like what if I built a fence? A solid 6-foot-tall fence, right along the edge of her backyard, legally, absolutely within my rights. And just imagine her face, the rage, the disbelief, the horror. I could practically see it in slow motion, cartoon style, like a Saturday morning comic strip. But I knew I couldn't just daydream, I had to plan. I pulled out my laptop, checked property lines, called contractors. Yes, I was serious. And then I smiled, maybe a little too much, thinking about the first day of construction. Of course, I had to be careful. Karen had spies everywhere, or at least she thought she did. I imagined her hiding binoculars behind her hydrangeas, recording my every move for the HOA newsletter. But let her. This was going to be fun. I wasn't about to let her terrorize my life just because she thought she owned the universe. As I looked across the newly purchased lake property that afternoon, the sun glinting off the water, I felt a rush. Freedom, yes, but also anticipation. Because I knew that the moment that first fence post went into the ground, Karen's world would tilt on its axis. Her perfectly controlled little kingdom was about to be shaken. And just like that, I had my first encounter with what I now like to call Karen-level chaos. The mailman called later that day, whispering about a woman in a floral sun hat packing her porch, glaring at my new property like she was auditioning for a horror movie. I laughed, I really did. But beneath the laughter, a tiny warning bell rang in my head. This wasn't going to be easy. Karen doesn't just throw tantrums, she escalates. And in her mind, she was already drafting a 12-point plan to get me arrested, fined, or banished from the neighborhood entirely. That's when I realized, owning a lake is one thing, surviving Karen is another. And believe me, this was only the beginning. Karen's first real attempt to stop me, storming over with the fury of 1,000 HOA newsletters, rules clutched in her hands, and her eyes locked on my innocent little smile. The next morning, I was sipping my coffee, enjoying the calm before the storm, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a high-heeled charge across my driveway. I peeked out the window, and of course, there she was, Karen, the human embodiment of an HOA rulebook, marching like she was leading a military operation. She stopped at the edge of my property, flinging her arms like she was conducting an orchestra of outrage. Her voice carried across the lawn like a foghorn in a library. "You can't do this. That lake is not yours. I will not let you destroy the neighborhood." I took a deep breath, trying to prepare myself for whatever theatrical performance was about to unfold. I opened the door slowly and greeted her with a calm, unnervingly cheerful smile. "Good morning, Karen. Beautiful day to talk about property lines, huh?" Her eyes narrowed. "Property lines? Do you think a line on a map matters more than community harmony?" I raised an eyebrow. Community harmony? You mean the one where you patrol everyone's mailbox and measure our lawns with a ruler? She gasped like I had insulted her mother, the HOA, and the entire suburban code of ethics all at once. "How dare you?" she shrieked. "I've seen the plans, I know what you're plotting." And that's when she whipped out her little folder of HOA papers, probably laminated and color-coded, and started waving them like they were sacred scrolls. She was determined to lecture me on rules that, frankly, didn't apply to me. I leaned on the porch railing, sipping my coffee, and watched her go full Karen mode. It was like watching a volcano ready to erupt, except instead of lava, it was pure indignation and bad posture. "Karen," I said slowly, "I own the lake now, I have all the permits, everything is legal, so technically there's nothing you can do." She tilted her head like I had just grown a second head. "Legal? You think legality matters when it comes to neighborhood integrity? I will, she faltered, searching desperately for a weapon. Her folder shook in her hands. "I will call the HOA." I laughed. "Please do. Call the HOA, call anyone you want. I've got everything documented. Permits, property lines, the works. You'll just make yourself look silly." At that, she sputtered. She tried to speak, stopped, clenched her fists, and stomped around like a toddler denied dessert. Then she did something that truly surprised me. She started knocking on my neighbors' doors, trying to rally reinforcements. "He can't just own the lake. We have rules. The neighborhood will fall apart." I watched from my porch, half amused, half worried. Some of the neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering. Others just shook their heads and went back inside. Karen's attempts to recruit an army were less than successful. By mid-morning, she returned, flustered and red-faced like a character in a bad sitcom. She stomped up to my door again. "I've had it. You will regret this. I will make sure your every move is monitored. Every move." I leaned closer, smiling. "Karen, I really hope you've got a chair because you're going to be busy. I plan to enjoy the lake, maybe build a fence and live my life. And if you spend all your time monitoring me, well, I hope you like stress. It's very fashionable this season." Her jaw dropped. I swear, for a second she looked like she was going to faint. Then, in true Karen fashion, she whirled on her heel and stormed off, probably to plot a 12-step plan involving subpoenas, HOA newsletters, and passive-aggressive flyers. I closed the door and let out a sigh. The adrenaline was still pumping. Buying the lake was just the beginning. I could already tell Karen wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. And the fun, the real fun, hadn't even started yet. That's when I made my first big decision. I was going to build that fence. 6 feet of perfectly legal, yet absolutely infuriating boundary that would. Well, let's just say it would drive Karen completely insane. Because here's the thing. Karen thrives on control. And soon she'd realize she had zero control over me or the fence. Fence day arrives, and Karen shows up like she's auditioning for a reality show, complete with binoculars, a megaphone, and a dramatic meltdown that my neighbors won't soon forget. The day had finally come. Fence day. I could hardly contain my excitement, or maybe it was just nervous anticipation. Because while buying a lake is fun, building a 6-foot fence right along Karen's property line, well, that's a whole other level of suburban drama. I had my plans, my permits, and a team of contractors ready. They were cheerful, professional, and most importantly, oblivious to the sheer chaos they were about to step into. I, on the other hand, knew exactly what was coming. I could almost hear Karen's mental gears grinding like a runaway train. I was outside, sipping coffee and supervising when I saw her first. Karen, perched on her porch, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that screamed, "I'm about to cause a scene," binoculars hanging from her neck, and a folding chair tucked under one arm. She looked like she was ready to camp out for a week just to watch every post go in. "Morning, Karen," I called cheerfully, waving. "Beautiful day for some construction, huh?" Her eyes narrowed to the size of pinpoints. "Morning. This is an abomination, a 6-foot wall in our neighborhood. I will stop this. I will stop this." The contractors, trying not to laugh, exchanged glances behind their masks. I could feel the tension building. This was it, the moment Karen had been fantasizing about in her nightly HOA-themed nightmares. I motioned to the crew. "All right, let's start with the first post." Karen gasped like I'd just declared war. She whipped out her phone and started recording, narrating her own commentary. Illegal, I will sue, this is outrageous. Everyone watching, you must stop him. I waved. Hi neighbors, don't worry, it's all legal. She wasn't done. No, Karen never stops. She stomped toward the crew, waving her laminated HOA papers like they were swords. You can't. I demand you stop immediately. This is a violation of community standards. One of the contractors, trying to be polite, explained that we had all permits, that the property lines were verified, and that we were doing nothing illegal. Karen's face went from red to purple in about 3 seconds. I swear, I half expected smoke to start rising from her ears. Then came her first tactical maneuver. She grabbed a hose and started spraying water near the fence line, not at anyone, but enough to make a dramatic point. Contractors dodged carefully, trying to avoid soaked boots. I just stood back, sipping coffee, silently applauding her creativity. Really, Karen, you brought a hose, I called out. Is this your new legal strategy? She froze for a split second, looked like she was calculating some devious plan, then screamed, "This is unacceptable," and stormed back to her porch, grabbing more papers for reinforcements. The rest of the morning went like this, a delicate dance between construction and chaos. Every post we hammered in, every section of wood we raised, Karen would be there, peering over her binoculars, muttering threats, filming us like she was directing a low-budget reality show. And yet, here's the thing. The fence was going up, solid, legal, and completely infuriating to her. I could feel a sense of satisfaction bubbling inside me every time a post went into the ground. Not maliciously, well, maybe just a little, but mostly because I knew the day Karen realized she had zero control over it would be glorious. Neighbors began peeking out from their windows, whispering, smiling, and trying not to laugh at the spectacle. One kid even snuck onto his bike to get a closer look, pretending to take notes. I could almost hear the neighborhood buzzing with silent amusement at Karen's escalating meltdown. By afternoon, the first stretch of fence was standing tall and straight. Karen, of course, wasn't done. She brought out a megaphone this time, yelling, "You will stop! I'm calling the HOA, the city, the president, everyone." I leaned back, calm as ever. "Call away, Karen. By the time they arrive, we'll have another 3 posts in. I hope you like standing around. It's good exercise for stress relief." And that's when I realized something important. Karen doesn't quit. She never does. But neither do I, and as I watched her packing like a caged animal, I knew this was just the beginning of a long, entertaining, and legally solid feud. The fence cuts through her backyard, Karen escalates to full-blown stunts, and the neighborhood gets front-row seats to the madness. Things are about to get even messier and funnier. By the time mid-morning rolled around, the fence was halfway built, and Karen had officially escalated to full-on drama mode. I could hear her from across the yard before I even saw her, a high-pitched scream punctuated by frantic stomps on the pavement. She looked like she had just discovered the world was ending, and in her mind, the fence was the apocalypse. She appeared at the edge of her yard, binoculars dangling, megaphone in hand, and a clipboard stacked with HOA rulebooks under her arm. I swear, she looked ready to lead a protest march, or maybe a one-woman war against suburban living. "Stop, you cannot do this," she bellowed, amplifying her voice like she was broadcasting to a small country. "I will not allow this monstrosity. The neighborhood will crumble." I sipped my coffee and leaned casually on the fence posts we'd already installed. "Karen," I called out, "you do realize I'm just putting up a fence, right? Nothing illegal, nothing harmful, just a fence. You might want to sit down. It's going to be a long day." Her jaw dropped. I could see the mental gears spinning, her mind trying desperately to find some loophole in the laws of property ownership, HOA regulations, and common sense. She tried stomping closer, but the contractors had politely created a safe zone, leaving her at a legal distance. And then it happened, her first stunt. She climbed onto a small garden ladder she had brought for dramatic effect and started leaning dangerously close to the fence, waving her papers like they were flaming torches. "I will not let you, I demand." "Careful there," I said, trying not to laugh. We wouldn't want you to hurt yourself. OSHA might get involved." The ladder wobbled. She flailed. Her papers went flying. The contractors ducked instinctively. And then she leapt down, landing like a cat or maybe a very angry raccoon. Either way, it was chaotic, theatrical, and absolutely Karen. Neighbors had started appearing at windows and porches, whispering and trying to hide smiles. A few even pulled out their phones to capture the madness. I could hear muffled laughter from the street. Karen was inadvertently giving everyone the entertainment of the month. But she wasn't done. Oh no. Next, she tried the call the authorities move. She stomped back inside and immediately started dialing on her phone, yelling into the receiver. "This is an emergency. He's violating every HOA rule imaginable. Send help." I waved cheerfully. "Hi, Karen. Thanks for the call. I hope they arrive quickly so we can finish this stretch of fence before they get here." Her flailing hand gestures were nearly cartoonish. This is outrageous," she shrieked, packing like a caged tiger. And that's when she noticed the fence crew quietly measuring, leveling, and hammering in posts with military precision. She froze, eyes wide. Her mouth moved, but nothing came out. I swear I could see her mental meltdown in real time. Every post we hammered in was a blow to her perfectly curated world of control. Every wooden panel installed was a victory dance for me. By late afternoon, the first full stretch of the fence was standing. Solid, imposing, legal, infuriating. Karen's face went through the full spectrum of emotion: horror, disbelief, anger, and finally, a kind of grudging respect she would never admit out loud. She stormed off briefly, muttering to herself, probably plotting her next move, her grand strategy that would involve subpoenas, petitions, and maybe even a public demonstration. I just shook my head and smiled, enjoying the sweet, calm chaos of my half-built fence and the knowledge that Karen had officially lost control. Before leaving for the day, I looked across the property and whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning. Just wait until we finish the whole thing. The real fun starts tomorrow." The fence reaches the point where it cuts through her backyard. Karen escalates to a full-blown standoff, and the neighborhood witnesses the drama of the century. Things are about to get even crazier. The next morning, I stepped outside and froze for just a second, not because of the sunrise or the serene lake, but because of the scene unfolding in Karen's backyard. She had gone full drama queen mode. There she was, perched on a folding chair like a general surveying a battlefield, armed with binoculars, a megaphone, and a stack of papers that looked like they weighed more than her. I could see her glaring at the half-built fence like it personally insulted her family heritage. I had to remind myself, stay calm. Don't feed the fire, but also maybe feed the popcorn because this was going to be good. I waved casually. "Morning, Karen, how's it going over there?" She pointed her megaphone at me and screeched, "You will regret this. This is a travesty. I've already called the HOA, the city, and possibly the FBI. You're going too?" I sipped my coffee. "Call away. By the time anyone shows up, we'll have another 3 posts in. Hope you brought snacks." Karen's jaw dropped. Her eyes bulged. She stomped around like a toddler denied candy. And then she did the unthinkable. She tried to physically block the construction. She grabbed a rake from her yard and stood right at the property line, waving it like a sword. "Stop! I will not let you destroy my backyard." I put my hands up, trying not to laugh. "Karen, you do realize that line there? That's my property. This is completely legal." She froze, then screamed, then wobbled her rake threateningly, then froze again. The contractors, trying not to look terrified, gave her a wide berth. I realized she wasn't just angry, she was improvising a full-on, one-person protest. Neighbors began appearing at windows, porches, even the street corner. Some whispered, some filmed, and a few just stood in awe at the spectacle. I swear I could hear someone muttering, "I should have sold popcorn instead of lemonade." Karen wasn't finished. Oh no. She climbed a small tree near the property line and started waving her arms like she was signaling an army of invisible reinforcements. "I will stop this. Neighbors, witness this injustice," she yelled. I took a deep breath, walked over to the first completed post, and gently tapped it with my hand. "Look, Karen, strong, legal, solid. You can scream all you want, it won't budge." Her face went from red to purple to an expression I can only describe as pure horror. Every hammer strike, every post installed, every panel of wood was a personal defeat. I could see the gears turning in her mind. She wanted to escalate, to outsmart, to win. But legally, she had nothing. And then the ultimate Karen maneuver. She tried to negotiate with the fence itself. She leaned against a post, gave it a stern glare, and muttered, "You can't divide us. This is a community." I swear, if it were a cartoon, smoke would have started puffing out of her ears. By late afternoon, the first full stretch of the fence was standing. 6 feet tall, unmovable, perfectly legal, and infuriating to Karen beyond words. She had tried climbing, waving, yelling, negotiating, and even calling for imaginary reinforcements. Nothing worked. The fence was officially undefeated. I took a step back, surveying my handiwork, and whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning." The lake was mine, the fence was mine, and the control she so desperately craved, gone. Karen finally retreated to her porch, slumping into her chair like a stormed-upon general. I could hear her muttering, probably drafting a 50-step revenge plan in her head. But that's fine. I was ready, calm, confident, and I had neighbors secretly cheering me on. Karen tries to escalate legally, dragging the HOA and city inspectors into her war. But things take an unexpected twist, and she starts losing in ways she didn't expect. The morning the city inspector arrived, I knew things were about to get even more entertaining. Karen had called everyone she could think of, the HOA, the city, possibly even the ghost of the founding father of suburban drama. And now the inspector was pulling up in a beige sedan, clipboard in hand, ready to judge the legality of my half-built fence. Karen, of course, was already at full volume, standing on her porch like a general preparing for battle. Megaphone in hand, papers flying, she was announcing to the entire neighborhood, "This is illegal. He will pay. Witness the crime." I waved casually. "Good morning, Karen. I hope you brought coffee. It's going to be a long day." The inspector stepped out, briefcase in hand, giving me a polite nod. I could see Karen practically vibrating with rage behind him. She lunged forward. "Sir, do you see this? He's destroying the neighborhood. He's—" The inspector raised a hand. "Ma'am, please, I'm here to inspect property lines, permits, and construction compliance." Karen sputtered. "Compliance? Do you see the fence? It's a 6-foot wall of—" I leaned on a fence post, sipping my coffee. Legal, solid, fully permitted, and very tall. The inspector followed me calmly, measuring posts, checking permits, verifying the property line. Every step he took made Karen's face contort in real time. I could almost hear the gears in her brain grinding, trying desperately to find a loophole that didn't exist. Neighbors peeked out their windows, some whispering, some smirking. I swear someone was filming it for Instagram. Karen's fury was becoming neighborhood entertainment, and I had a front row seat. After about 20 minutes of careful inspection, the inspector turned to Karen and said something she did not expect. "Everything is in order. Property lines are correct, permits are valid, and the construction is fully compliant with city regulations." There was a long pause, then Karen's eyes went wide, then her jaw dropped, then her megaphone slipped from her hands. I thought she might actually faint. What? This can't be," she screamed, flailing her arms like she was fighting invisible ninjas. "Everything is legal," I repeated calmly. "So feel free to continue watching the fence grow, Karen. It won't budge." She stomped around, muttering, packing, and trying desperately to come up with another plan. But the inspector had made it clear. Karen was out of options. Legally, she had nothing. I could almost hear the tiny voice in her head screaming, "How can this be happening? How is this allowed? Why isn't anyone terrified of me?" Meanwhile, I stood back, enjoying my coffee, watching her implode quietly. Karen finally slumped into her porch chair, trying to regain some dignity. But her shoulders twitched with rage. I swear she was drafting her next move mentally. A lawsuit, maybe a neighborhood petition, possibly a strongly worded letter written in calligraphy. I looked at the fence stretching along the property line, the sunlight glinting off the freshly installed panels. 6 feet of legal, unmovable wood separating me from the chaos that was Karen. And I realized something wonderful. The moment I had been waiting for had arrived. Karen's perfect control over the neighborhood had crumbled. Even better, I knew the neighbors were secretly cheering. Some gave thumbs up, others whispered "finally" from behind curtains, and I could not blame them. Karen's antics had crossed a line between entertaining and absurd. By the time the inspector left, Karen had retreated inside, muttering to herself. I could hear her plotting, but for now, she had no legal ground, no allies strong enough to stop the fence, and no way to regain control. I smiled, taking in the quiet calm of my property. The lake sparkled in the afternoon sun, the half-built fence stood tall, and Karen was simmering. Karen crumbles further at the HOA board meeting, ranting and trying to sway the neighbors, but the truth comes out, and her meltdown becomes legendary. The climax is approaching. The day of the HOA board meeting finally arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air as I walked in. Karen had been hyping this up for days, telling anyone who would listen that I was destroying the neighborhood and that she was taking action to save our community. By now, she had gathered an audience of neighbors, curious onlookers, and even a few reporters she claimed were official HOA correspondents. I took a deep breath and entered the meeting room, trying to look calm and composed. Karen, of course, was already there, perched at the front like she was about to deliver a TED talk on suburban justice. Her hair was slightly frazzled, and her papers were stacked in neat little piles, ready for dramatic effect. She had that gleam in her eye, the one that says, "I'm about to lose control, but I'll take everyone down with me." The HOA president called the meeting to order. Karen immediately jumped to her feet. "This man has illegally taken over the lake next door," she shouted, waving her papers like torches. "He is building a 6-foot wall through the neighborhood, and I demand it stop immediately." I leaned back in my chair and smiled politely. "Good morning, everyone. I'm here to clarify a few things about the property and the fence." The room went quiet. Everyone turned to listen. Karen, of course, interpreted the silence as judgment against her. She began packing. "You cannot be serious. This is a travesty. I've seen the plans. He's violating every rule in the HOA handbook." I held up a folder of my own. "Actually, everything here is fully legal. Property lines have been verified, permits have been issued, and the fence complies with all city and HOA regulations. I'd be happy to show you." Karen's face turned a shade of red that I didn't think was physically possible. She sputtered, trying to interrupt me, but the HOA president politely asked her to sit down. "Let him speak," the president said. I calmly went through all the documents. Verified property lines, city permits, construction compliance, and even photos of the fence being built. Each point I made was factual, clear, and undeniable. Karen's protests grew more desperate with every sentence. She shouted over me, stomped her feet, and even tried to point to imaginary violations that didn't exist. By mid-meeting, it became painfully obvious to everyone. Karen had no case. She turned to the neighbors, pleading for support. "Do you see this? He's destroying the neighborhood. We have to stop him." The neighbors, well, they were having none of it. One by one, they shook their heads, muttered quietly, or gave polite but firm smiles. I could see the tension draining from the room. For me, a wave of relief. For Karen, a tidal wave of rage. Finally, Karen collapsed into her chair, papers scattered around her like battlefield debris. She was trembling, muttering under her breath, probably calculating her next desperate move. The HOA president cleared his throat and said, "Everything here is legal. The fence may continue as long as all permits are valid, which they are." Karen tried one last dramatic attempt. "But community standards, morality, our values." I smiled. "Karen, the fence doesn't violate community standards, and as for morality, well, it's just a fence. But it does guarantee privacy. Maybe you'll enjoy it someday." She froze, her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. You could see the gears in her mind locking up. And just like that, she had nothing. No allies, no legal footing, no way to stop the fence. She had completely crumbled in front of the HOA and, more importantly, in front of the entire neighborhood. As the meeting ended, I quietly packed up my papers. The fence was officially unstoppable. The lake was mine. And Karen was quietly seething, her grand plans in ruins. As I walked out, I could hear neighbors whispering, "Finally, she got what was coming." I couldn't help but smile. The dramatic saga wasn't just a victory, it was satisfying justice delivered entirely within the law. The fence is finished, the lake is officially mine, and Karen's meltdown reaches its final, hilarious peak. The neighborhood finally sees the outcome, and peace, mostly, returns until the next HOA drama. It was a bright, sunny morning when the last post went into the ground. The fence, 6 feet of glorious, unmovable wood, stood tall, straight, and completely legal. I stepped back, taking it all in, my lake shimmering in the sunlight, the fence marking the property line with perfect precision, and Karen. She was already at her porch, arms crossed, glaring as if she could burn the fence to splinters with sheer force of will. I swear, she looked like she was auditioning for a soap opera called Desperate for HOA Control. I walked over, trying to stay calm. "Good morning, Karen. Lovely day to enjoy some privacy, huh?" Her face twisted into something that could only be described as a cross between a scowl and a silent scream. "Privacy? This is an outrage. You've destroyed everything. Neighborhood integrity, chaos." I smiled. "Actually, I think the neighborhood's just fine, and thanks to this fence, I'll finally get to enjoy my property without, well, constant commentary from you." Her jaw dropped. Then, as if realizing the words themselves were a personal attack, she let out a dramatic wail that echoed down the street. "This is unacceptable. I will." She froze mid-sentence when she noticed the neighbors. Windows opened, curtains pulled back, kids peeking around corners, all watching her. Some whispered, some laughed quietly. I swear one neighbor even held up a team fence sign. Karen's face went from rage to horror to utter defeat in less than 10 seconds. I couldn't help myself. I whispered under my breath, mostly for my own amusement, "Welcome to the private lake club, Karen." She spun around, flailing her arms like she was casting a spell to erase the fence. How, this can't be. You neighbors, he hasn't followed the rules." I just leaned against the freshly built fence, calm as ever. "Karen, every post, every permit, every inspection, everything is legal. If you want to argue, the city and HOA have already confirmed it. And as for the fence, well, it's not going anywhere." She stared at the fence like it had personally insulted her family lineage. Then came the final act of desperation. She stomped down the stairs, grabbed her megaphone, and started yelling at maximum volume, hoping to rally an imaginary army of supporters. "Neighbors, this is an injustice." And then she noticed the children on the sidewalk, the neighbors waving politely, and the contractor still putting in finishing touches on the fence. Nobody was on her side. Everyone was quietly, politely, legally watching me win. Her shoulders slumped, her megaphone drooped. Her final words were muttered, almost inaudible. "I cannot believe this." I took a slow, victorious breath. 6 feet of wood, legal approval, completed construction, and a lake finally mine. Karen had officially melted down, and there was nothing she could do. The neighborhood sighed in relief. Some came over to congratulate me quietly, others just smiled from their windows. And the fence? It stood like a monument to sanity and property rights. I couldn't resist one last glance at Karen. She was still muttering to herself on her porch, papers scattered, hair slightly frazzled, glaring at the lake like it had personally betrayed her. I smiled. Peace had been restored, at least for now. That's the thing about HOA drama. It never truly ends. But at least in this chapter, justice was served. Legally, calmly, and yes, with a little humor. I leaned against the fence, looking out over the lake, and whispered just for me. Sometimes winning is just about building a fence and letting reality do the rest. The sun reflected off the water, the fence stood firm, and Karen was officially out of options. The neighborhood could finally breathe. And as for me, I had my lake, my fence, and the sweetest victory of all, watching Karen's legendary meltdown unfold, live, and unedited. The lake was mine. The fence was mine. And Karen, she had officially earned a permanent place in neighborhood history as the queen of HOA chaos. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.